It's been one interesting year. I wish everyone a happy new year and let us begin. This has been one heck of a year, as I said, the previous video. Year in review. What a trip. This all started because I put out a video. Well, two reasons. The first video was me talking about NPD as I had come up with a hypothesis on the structure of the mind. And this year has been interesting that in many ways has proven that the structure of the mind or thinking mind is correct regardless of quote gender. And within that year we've seen uh, opportunities blown and maybe some opportunities, well, mostly opportunities blown, but over stupid reasons is that. And learned a great deal about myself, but we've also learned a great deal about how they how these behaviors have are very toxic. How these toxic behaviors are affecting the American culture and therefore the world. We have learned about the world that we're not the Americans are not the only persons in this world. You have the ascendancy of China, and it's doing so with a ridiculous chip on its shoulder. We're seeing their actions within the South China Sea, their actions with censorship. We're seeing how they're recolonizing Africa to the point where even having Kenya change their laws, which is sad. Um, you see, you've learned about bigotry and racism, and racism, even though you can say it's a toxic, semi-toxic form of pride, where bigotry is basically an externalization, which rolls into the cluster B NPD system, which is a devaluement of self. So if something's outside of them, they have to try to devalue that, and it can get to the point of being pathological, which is quite horrific. E, we learned about both the masculine and the feminine, and there's one part about the feminine I think I didn't come through to is we know within the masculine men, as Jung stated, and I disagree with Jung in one point where he's talking about the feminine doesn't need to go through a challenge of growth. I disagree with that. I think women need to go through a growth to understand and be able to deal with their own emotion states and emotional self. Because if not, you get really horrible behavior where what's so I was dealing with. I was observing a couple once, and basically this person in the feminine part of the couple was just pure worry. Worry was the baseline emotion there, and then her masculine, her man, was just anger, and you could see how she manipulated through language and other points. Just watching the dude. As I said, the feminine picks smart enough to do the job, dumb enough not to have a clue, as we can see with Prince William. You know, he's going to be in for a world of surprises once he ascends, but maybe not. Maybe he sees it, maybe he doesn't. Even if he does, he won't say anything, and if he doesn't, well, who cares? It's well, actually, the British Isle will care because it will have repercussions for the world. Anyways, so we see because the feminine doesn't, it's about not having responsibility or taking on responsibility, externalizing the responsibility to the masculine. And this is even stated within the Bible. So it's not like it's something that's new. It's just with our technologies, it has taken it the the meme set of ideas has more places to sit within and create more havoc. And it's not saying that feminine is havoc. It is just as masculine when it's overly done or not contained is physical violence. Overly feminine is emotional and mental violence. And so you could and they're both stunted. NPD cluster B is a stunted growth state where a psychopath is basically a 1 year old and a narcissist is approximately 1 to 3, maybe 5 years old as far as their development stage. It doesn't matter what age they are, that's where their development stopped. And they externalize their inability so it's just basically the ego, super ego, then becomes everything, and then to try to in a narcissist, in a psychopath, it's just all id. There's no, it's and then it's and everything is an object. With you say within a narcissist, at least this is my observation. Or cluster B, it's they've all super ego crushed the child self. Let's see here. Let's go back into this photo. It's like a healthy person might still have these three, but they're flowing back and forth of those three. And then the feminine is inward to outwards, starting with the body, heart, head. And as we see with a person of NPD and psychopathy, being lower on shame, or psychopath don't really care. And so they try to get you to, so a person has courage and neutrality or acceptance, they try to reason of the higher port, they try to pull their negativity downwards because it is a view of distance in their minds. And this flows into how we end up into politics and everything else, which is where this all started. Because, I put this out there from my own experience dealing with somebody who was externalization. It was just coming and figuring out this mind structure, or someone's actually. And it's sad because those persons have done horrific things, and they're back just like a little 3 year old trying to play parents off. They're using Hollywood and they're trying to get their basically being a little child and creating more havoc for the people who actually create things in this world. And Hollywood and the worst part of the 1% use that how they use African Americans and everything is basically a cluster B type manipulation structure, and they're fighting that with everything they got to try to keep it, even at the possible, even to the point of protecting insurrectionists. So this has been one crazy year because and we've learned a great deal. Granted, but it's just been one way crazy year because we're looking at this. So let's look at, for instance, a person with a cluster B NPD starts at shame. So if anybody has reason, neutrality, courage, they can't stand it because it activates them. So what they do is they try to externalize themselves and try to get other people around them, which I say it's feminine because it's an outward, and psychopathy is so. So this is as they break into superego, golden child, invisible, and scapegoat. They hate their self. They hate their heart. So they try to scapegoat their heart. Superego is a public self, and they split into private, public selves. But it's still basically a three-part system. And this was all observed, and in reality, this is how the MPD, regardless if they're masculine or feminine, MPD is definitely a feminine, and psychopathy is definitely a masculine because you can be a psychopath with MPD, but you can't be an NPD. But it's very rare to be an NPD, or I've not seen any readings or anything where you can be NPD and be a psychopath. So, because the psychopath, everything is an object, and with NPD, everything emotion objects. And I guess that's why a lot of the LGBT communities losing their marbles, but not every most. And it's the thing is, they're doing this whole Q plus thing. Well, I was able to suss out the fact that the Q and plus was mostly to do with trying to then dictate to other people to, to dictate what is gender, which is a bunch of bullshit. And they don't like that. I don't care. The We know scientifically there's different brain structures. That's fine. Since we know that it's a scientific fact, LGBT, it is what it is. But when they start doing all this other stuff, then we're getting into an NPD structure. And that is just purely bad behavior where they try to externalize themselves and not care about other people's boundaries, and which goes against the very foundational thinking of America in itself. And and they just want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with that, and that's don't really care because bad behavior is bad behavior, and it makes the persons who who are are LGBT, but still have boundaries, still have respect for other people. Those other childlike things, they make it difficult for them, and it's just wrong. Wrong is wrong. It's a universal thing. Being a braggy little shit and then thinking, well, I can be a brat and you're supposed to put up with it. And the thing is, they usually do that to persons who don't have that shame. That's the worst part. They try to project their worst self, try to get the person who has a sense of self to disassociate, and then try to dump their fear and their anger and their shame and their self-hatred into the person who doesn't have those behaviors or have that self-thinking, and it just creates havoc. And then they stood. So then once the person who's defends themselves, then they act like, then they go into a victim mentality. We see that with the former president, who we've seen split, and he basically talks to himself like his mother and his father, and he's basically a little child. So this is where everything started, and then because I had to sit there and I needed to eventually it was because of brand and everything else, because I'm a legally registered sole proprietor, also means I have a brand, and also as a human being, I also have my other rights. Because of this social situation, when Kathleen Kennedy fired Gina Carano, and but the thing is, wasn't that she fired Gina Carano? She's head of the studio, whatever. It was that she was mainly trying to then turn it to make it look like Gina Carano was being a bigot or racist, when the fact that Gina Carano wasn't, it couldn't be, because she was truly had had and has probably a lot of respect for Carl Weathers, because for being an athlete and being in Hollywood and everything else, you might not like Gina Carano's politics. Some of them I personally think like, okay, that's a little off, but she has the right to be her humanity and to be who she is. And Kennedy, in this whole her whole process, her whole thing of this, I'm not into the whole woke thing. I don't even know what the fuck that is, to be honest with you. But it's this idea. It's a fake anti-racism, where while it's actually being even more bigoted than what's really going on. Wheel of Time, great show. I haven't read the books, but all the characters represented the world, and it did not try to weaken different types of person, the different quote races or whatever, personally adaptive strategies, genetic adaptive strategies. It didn't do that. It just said people are people, and what would they do in these certain situations, which is what people want to see. They don't want to as It's one of be escapism, but they also want to see themselves, and there's the myriad of the world. And I think they did a good job on that. But where Star Wars was, is Kennedy basically took the persons of ethnicity that were non-Caucasian and ran them around, and knowing what I've gone through myself, I mean, I've seen this pattern before in real life, and she didn't take that very well because it was the truth, and she'd been hiding behind it for decades. And that she's basically stabbed George Lucas in the back as a caretaker by trying to throw away the lore. Fortunately, under Favreau and Filoni, they've been bringing back the lore and creating just great stories. And the funny thing is, you just tell a great story and you put people in who are people. It doesn't matter, you know, what they look like, what's their heart state. Put them in these positions. We see the human condition is universal. It's our choice within religion or ethnicity or how we grew up. Ethnicity being cultural, structural, how we grew up makes devises different choices. But a good old popcorn movie, it's you do Spider-Man. It's good to see Mary Jane goes in a she's in the comics. There's this Caucasoid redhead. In the movies, she's well, I don't know, American, and that's what bigots are having problems with. But by just telling a story of you're just a human being, people don't really care. It's when you start pushing, you're trying to, as MPD persons, try to push and not respecting people's boundaries. Well, that's where the pushback is. Now, bigots are always going to be bigots because that's their competition strategy. So we went from that to trying to get the president's, what is it, agenda done. Now, before that, everyone decided to hack my computers and hack my phone and put everything I do online and thinking I'm going to freaking. And it's been very stressful. Plus, having an admiral who fucked over my career purposefully and via culture, trying to constantly throw and doing his bullshit, but he had no idea how realistically, he had no idea how intelligent I really am. And it really probably pisses him off because he's a bigot by my definition of what a bigot is. And one of the things, what the good news is, by doing all these things, it showed how bigotry acts. The constant why, the constant segregation, the constant going after anything that has value, destroying your networks. They've shown it all. And then one of the most hilarious things, people want me to do my real estate stuff on a hacked computer so that way they can then steal my processes. You've been doing that to me my entire life. Go fuck yourselves. And and this has happened from the military, to where I put in an EO and was able to successfully pull that off, to even the school, which was Full Sail, which is a great school, but I took the internet marketing program because at the time they were the only one teaching it. It was my ideas of brand response marketing, and the course director Rob Kroll and John Renesky, they fired an African American dude who had a PhD. Then Renesky goes gets a PhD. But when I went to go get a job afterwards, it only came in recently is this marketing firm. They use they get you to go, okay, what would you do if this? And I put it together, and then I realized later they were using my systems, but they hired somebody else, and I just went, okay, I've seen this process before, because his behaviors didn't make any sense of not calling me back and just being completely unprofessional. And I realized, oh yeah, they probably called the school on who they sought to, Rob Kroll. And Rob and Renesky had to destroy me because they were making their careers off of my idea. Now that the school knows this, they probably still have their jobs, which is and unfortunately for them, Renesky then did a defamation again, and Kroll did a defamation. Plus, when I had my master's, you had another course director, which once again was proven that I was telling the truth, and this has come up over time and time again. So it's not like, once again, I actually love Full Sail. I think it's a great school, but you have bigots who will then defame and libel you, and we've seen that, and then they'll keep their jobs. So you know, I definitely, as I stop and think about this, as I'm thinking about this right now, Renesky definitely defamed my name, saying I didn't come up with brand response when I had, but unfortunately for him, we had, I would, when I was doing one of the president of called the Student Branding Society, Rob Kroll was protecting this one dude who was being an asshole. Who I was like, hey, if I'm supposed to be leading this, why are you coming after me? And it was my ideas that we created a system, and I did it for a nonprofit, but the people within the nonprofit, not the owner, not the person who started, she loved it, but the persons who are, as we call, communal narcissists, couldn't do it because that means they would have to be fully within the brand, and their whole brand was not about actually helping the veterans because it was towards a veteran thing. It was about making it look like it, or look good, not be good. And I'm the quite opposite. I want it to be good. I can care less how I'm not all flashy. I'm more about getting the job done. So, like I said, Full Sail is an amazing school, but they've made millions upon tens of millions on my ideas because I actually started. I've noticed that from a decade ago that their marketing was using the ideas of brand response. And I also knew that it was from Rob because he started following me and doing different things, seeing what I was trying to learn. So they still have their jobs probably. So that's the thing about what's these far righters are bitching about is because they want to still be able to be crappy human beings and then say how good they are when they really are crappy human beings. We also went into how how bigots in general, Catholic Kennedy is using one of the things that a lot of people are upset with is how the bigots at the top create these havocs of the prison industrial complex, the quote angry black woman, which is basically just a woman with NPD, and and gays in the African American community to control everybody else, and then you have a slight middle class who are just racist. And also went in and showed how the vice president's former chief of staff was undercutting her and undermining her, and I feel sorry for her. But she has shown tremendous backbone and strength, and I see but it took a long time for her to really see that she was being undercut. And unfortunately, because of this, not just from her perspective, but a lot of people, because Kennedy and Hollywood in general, Hollywood is an entity, which includes the Kardashians, because I stated the Kardashians are the worst thing that's happened to African American in the last 20 years, because they were, because it was cool and edgy and cool and kitschy to show, oh, I can control the black American, and which you show them with Kanye, you know. And then the youngest one, and I know that there's a lot of NPD as they work within a structure, because the youngest one, when she was talking to Dr. Romney, the whole conversation, she was just pure anger and rage. You're not going to say what I don't want you to hear, as opposed to let's see what you have to hear. I brought you here. Let's have a conversation. So it told me more about how the whole Klan worked, and then also different things that they've been doing to undercut as the persons who threaten my family, they roll in back into them and they're trying to protect them. It's been quite a journey to see how bad behavior is perpetuated through America. And trust me, the Chinese and the Russians and the powers that do not want America to succeed have been watching closely. And they're learning. And they're adapting. And they're viewing this as we're about to fall, especially the fact when we look at Joe Manchin's behavior with the Build Back Better Act, which is a great act, great investment into humans, human infrastructure, as I called it. And it proved that he did two dog whistles. He did the ones where the Negroes are coming for your money, and then the other one is I can control this Negro with Senator Warnock. It's shown the that he would rather, and then he would rather throw his people under the bus, make sure that they stay poor. Him and McConnell mostly, and now they're trying then to help them and help the country grow. The opioid epidemic, it is because there are less opportunities. Because we've shipped jobs overseas, we're not investing in small businesses, and then they go, you should get a job. Well, there's no jobs. Or, well, you should take the $7 an hour. Well, $7 an hour is 30 years ago. You These companies have made money off of the inflationary process and then separated the Wall Street from Main Street and then use African Americans and LGBT to create this schism so nobody and noise so nobody knows what's going on and then create hate within the right wing, and it's just created this complete mess, all because of greed. But in their greed, they're destroying the very thing. They're ripping up the roots of the tree. And if a tree can't has no roots, it cannot grow. But hey, they got theirs. That's what they think. Um, so right now, and we also learned about both some of these secret societies, what their real purpose in the world is, especially in America. You, we have the understanding that yeah, there can be the Knights of the Republic, and what does it mean to be a Knight of the Republic? We can't use Jedi unless we turn it into the word like Kleenex, so you'd have to use it totally, and it means the military would have to take over that or buy out that copyright. But I don't see that, or it would become to such use over time that Jedi becomes as the word Kleenex, so therefore the copyright dies and it's transferred. But you can't say the Knight of the Republic. And we have looked at how do you become a Knight of the Republic across all of the spectrums of public service, which to include AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, military, of course, and the uses of public service, which teaches you to how to use and learn how to control your government. Unfortunately, because of the mess, the loud noises and the drum beating and the short patience of when you're young, the powers that be keep trying to make a lot of noise and banging drums. Look, squirrels. But those who are paying attention, who see this going on, understand it. They've been given some very powerful tools to continue on the greatness of the United States if we can get past 22 and 24 by not turning it into an authoritarian state, which is what has always been the battle as between those who are theocrats or and those who are secularists. And America was built on secularism where everyone found their own light in their own path. And that's the difference between the far right and the far left, communism versus authoritarian. And in the middle, someplace we're supposed to meet. Unfortunately, right now, the far right is winning. And then Kennedy is trying to, and Hollywood is trying to exasperate the situation because they use African Americans as the cudgel to manipulate European Americans. Now, I've said that you can't have 40% of the population, but when you think of 40% of the population not being educated and trained, but when realistically, it's more about 60% because about half of the European American is being duped into thinking they're going to get the spoils when they won't because they want to be able to kick down. And it is really sad, but that's slowly going to change. So it's been a very, very strange year. Another thing I'd like before we get on to the next part is Starbucks. The that they're that one or two lone stores up north who have voted to unionize because Starbucks, the company, has not followed through, has not followed with keeping their brand promise. This is very narcissistic, by the way. This is what psychopaths do. It's called the love bombing phase. They give you something good, and then they go, okay, well, that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And then bad managers, people who really don't know how to manage, really don't know how to make money, come in, and then they just start hammering the workforce, constantly whipsawing them, which is the NPD's personal favorite because they love the triangulation because they sit in the middle of 2 points of chaos because that's how the thinking person they're not thinking, but that's how the NPD person thinks, is using the dialectic because that's how they regulate their emotions. So they wear out their best employees and they bring in up their worst. And by creating a union, it creates a force to create the brand promise. Now, we now know, they've gone through and said, okay, this is what we love about Starbucks, this is what we hate about Starbucks, this is what we think the brand is, this is what, all the things about where they want. They've pretty much, hopefully, that they have gone through and said, and put it on the Reddit because if it's out there, it's going to make it harder for the lawyers to say, to, once the lawyers start playing their games with private investigators and stuff like that, if they haven't already started, they can say, look, see, they're doing exactly what we said they were going to do. They're coming in, they've poisoned my dog, they've kicked the cat, they don't know all the stupid things that they're going to do to try to break these small outlets. But if they need to stand strong and then show courage to bring on other outlets, which is what Starbucks is afraid of. They need to slowly bring on other stores. So if you have, so target, start talking to people in 2 or 300 stores, and assume you're only going to get about 50 to 100. But if you do that, so say, okay, this is what, and to do that, you got to say, this is what we want. If we win, and you have about 5 months left before people get tired. That's just the nature of humanity. And the lawyers know this. They're going to try to drag it out. I, the food service workers of America need to actually speak with them and start working with them, even if they are not collecting the union dues from them directly. They do helping them win helps them win across other places, and then that balances it out because Starbucks is going to be going into the point where they're going to have to pay a dividend, and that means they're going to have to actually treat their customers right, which means treating their employees right, which creates a synergistic system or a synergistic and symbiotic system of return customers, which then is the brand promise. So they need to place out and say, hey, this is what we want in a contract. Plus about, so it's like 100% and then do 200% of dumb shit, but know the core, whatever, and then put that on Reddit and say, this is what we're fighting for. Will you stand with us and fight with us? And we know this is what they're all going to do. Once they put that out, then start trying to find as many Starbucks stores to stand with them together. Because if you don't, the lawyers will overwhelm you. But if you get more stores on board, then you can overwhelm the lawyers. So I wish them well. I'm going to constantly keep updating and upgrading it as I keep hearing what's going on. But they gotta fight on their hands because that's going to affect all the workers. And if we do a race to the bottom, we'll become worse than a third world country that we say. But we're seeing that. That's the other thing about fighting this person that Kathleen Kennedy is protecting. They're a gang member and a cartel member, which then gives them too much political power, which turns us into a third world country, as we've seen what's going on in Mexico, where the cartels literally are telling the Mexico and South America in general are telling these farmers what to do taken away their sovereignty, taken away the ability to make capital and create a better life for them, themselves, and their children. And that's not cool at all. So we've learned about masonry. As like I said, yeah, as I went on that tangent, we learned about masonry and different secret societies are the way, which are not exactly what people think they are. Learned that, and that's back to men becoming men. But I do believe that there should be back to where I had my, you know, I think women do need to go through a process besides getting married and childbirth of finding and defining who they are, because those ones, because it squeezes out the persons who never did grow up, who are still stuck at being 3 years old, and it builds a better society because every it doesn't make psychological sense. And even when I'm reading the heroine's journey, it does not fit into my own observations, at least the books I've read on it. And I'm about to reread another one. But as far as looking at it, because I looked at the hero's journey, I've read the hero's journey, I've done from different perspectives, from writing perspective, read Jung years ago, all of Jung. Like I would sit in the library and just read. As I said, the one that always got me with the visions of Zosimus is The Alchemist. But there's we see just the behaviors that have gone on, that just the attacks that I've gone under. Then remember, I don't look out. I haven't looked anywhere online. I know this is being dumped out there. I know what's. I don't know where it's being dumped. I don't know. I don't. I purposely don't try to find it. It's. I do it on purpose. And people would be like, you know, the people who are weak because they're like, well, blah 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 blah. When the fact is, none of those persons who have been attacking could do what I'm doing, especially in the way that I've done it. And that's jealousy. And their behaviors have cost us, has cost the country at a time when you have the opportunity to truly move the country forward. If they had not, if followed Kathleen Kennedy's BS and said, okay, let's get on board and let's do this. I see this guy, I don't have to totally like somebody, but I see what they're doing. It's good for the country. It's good for everybody. It's good for their communities. Let's at least roll with this. We can get to it later. And it's funny. It flows right back to what I said to a buddy of mine, Don Rose. I said, yeah, you don't like black folks. I'm like, well, I don't like your behavior because I've seen what your behavior is, and I also could see how your behavior has been manipulated. And it's not, and it's all right. Would you like someone who's constantly trying to throw you under the bus, talking shit about you? Who's no, if unless you have zero self-esteem, no. And that's unfortunately what's happened to the African American community, where it shows up in the numbers of the marriage numbers. And then that situation is being floated up higher, so it's going to get more violent unless families are kept together. So 25% continuous marriage rate means you have all these basically these children growing up without two parents in the home to have the balance of the masculine and feminine, to have the understanding that yeah, you can create a life without it all, without the anger, and you can create these things, and it was done on purpose. I'm not saying it wasn't, but you see the damage that it's being done to the entire, not just African American culture and Hispanic culture, because the same thing is being done to Hispanics, but America in general, and it's being rotated up. That behavior is being rotated up into the even Caucasians. So if the Caucasians want to keep playing that game, they're going to destroy their own families, which is actually what the horrific part of the 1% want to do, because it's easy to control through anger. There's everyone talks about that Machiavellian statement: it's better to be to control through fear than love. But never no one says what the second statement is, because it says from before you can control fear, but you cannot control love. And I think I disagree with that, because I've always thought you control the absence of love. So if you're, which is a way of still saying fear, but you can still, and I've always used it to the persons who worked with well with me. It's like, hey, dude, we're gonna do cool shit, but, and I've seen it also within with my own, not just my own thinking and the way I've created systems, and people then try to steal it. It was basically damn Nick. That's what it means to be at that level, world class. You love what you do. You do what you love, and that's how. And you're willing to do whatever, because you're not really doing something that's work. You're doing something that you love, and you're getting really, really good at it. And we saw that's why McRaven was trying to undercut and say whatever, because he knew he was trying to destroy the command, but the stakes are too high to destroy what Marchenko created. I had to keep going, and that, I'm not going to, and to not go all the way would, be disrespectful to the better men who have gone, men and women who have gone before me. You always leave the door open. Unfortunately, bigots always try to find persons who will close the door behind them. Here's looking at you, Clarence Thomas. So, and one more thing, that's Prince Harry is one of the things is Hollywood's all upset about Prince Harry, because they were trying to control and manipulate and be the arbiters of Prince Harry, where that's a bunch of BS. Unbeknownst to them, they didn't understand how how the British system works. And I understand Lady Markle being upset, because she was expecting me to say one thing, and I didn't quite go there. But at the exact same time, I also did say the behavior of Lady Middleton and Lady Camilla, are abhorrent, and what they did to Markle was wrong. I still believe Markle is actually one with a big heart, and Prince William will never, as I said, it's because he's going to be the king and one day the crown. She'll be called queen. The crown, which is an entity, if she, there will not be in the one thing about the British Empire is it comes, there is still that from the Norse with the shield maiden, and there's an expectation of women to actually be able to fight, as shown by Queen Elizabeth II, in one of the few countries where they have female monarchs. But one thing is, there will not be a Caligula. The crown will not allow that, where say Prince William dies. So let's say Charles ascends after Queen Elizabeth, which we'll get to in a second. Charles ascends, then he dies quickly, and then all of a sudden William's up, then he dies quickly, and then so the young kids become king before he's 18, before he's of age, or when he's very young, before he has time to have life experience. She tries to be queen regent. The crown won't allow that. Won't allow her to try to control shit, and she will not like that. Don't really care. I'm still an American, which means I'm still a sovereign. And so these are understanding how these systems work gives me an insight far deeper than most people. Now, where this is going to is Queen, the Queen Elizabeth II, her prince, her husband, the one whose only task in life was to love her, has passed, and they've been married for many, many years. And it is known, it's very rare for persons who've been married that long. When one goes, usually the next goes within 1 to 2 years. Betty White was an anomaly. because it's a broken heart. What's the use? Here's New Year's coming up today. Many memories are with her, with the one person, because remember, as the crown and as the queen, everyone's pulling, everyone's taking, trying to take. There was one person who was giving, one person who cared, and that was her prince. He's no longer beside her, and it's hard. They die of a broken heart. So I do give an outpouring to Queen Elizabeth II because once she was thrust into history, and as I'm now understanding, feeling this really kind of sucks. History is thrusted upon her. She did not ask to be queen. She was not expecting to be queen. History was thrust upon her, and she's served history and is still serving history with remarkable nobility. And while most people look for to be celebrities and this and that, there's a difference between being a celebrity and being history. And especially when it's thrusted upon you, most falter, most fall, most give up and run. It is rare for those to stand within themselves, even if they did not want to, and to do so with such nobility. The world is very much in her debt, especially the peace, semi peace, because there's always war someplace, but in general, no large scale world wars between America, Europe, and the crown and the queen maintains somewhat stability, but is being trying to ripped apart right now. The world is in her debt, and I thank her personally. To Prince Harry and Lady Markle, go see your grandmother. Prince Harry, it is time that you lead your family. Lady Markle has been leading, been pushing, impressing, because that's kind of what African American women have been taught to do, and that's why they were destroying their own families. You need to put your foot down, spine up, and saying, "This is what we're going to do. We're going to go see my grandmother. We're going to have her great grandchildren, so she can look in their eyes and see them, and then you're going to learn. Even if you'll never be, even if you don't want to stay and become part of the quote the family, because Williams, as long as Kate's going to constantly try to segregate you because she views you as a threat, but still going through and learning all of the reasons for all the little silly things that they seem absolutely obnoxious to an American who just grew up as an American. Just understand it. Go through, learn it, have somebody teach you the manners and the rhythms and the history. And if Queen Elizabeth does that, which I know that she wants to desperately, she wants to make sure her heart is still someplace in this world. She has to pass the baton as the queen, but her heart misses her grandson. And she would desperately want to see her great grandchildren. And you can't wait to the Jubilee. Post haste, Harry. Return to England. Have your wife learn the processes without having to be in the family. And even at the end, 6 to 8 weeks, because you know it takes that long to totally change. Then come back to the United States, and then go not to Hollywood because you'll find out who's really your friend. And you'll find the Kardashians who are just trying to manipulate are not your friends. And as a prince, and also periodically do go take, you know, live stream the Ron LeGrand, and and as I said, the reason is yes, you have access to. I know the, like the Carlisle Group and all different types of monies coming in, people trying to jockey near you, but understanding how to create the deals, then you can add on the more fanciful not technologies, understanding how to create a deal in general, and understanding the entrepreneurial, basic entrepreneurial, which is still creating land rents, because everything's about property rights, from dirt rights to intellectual property rights. Understanding how to split up those rights is how you create capital. Kathleen Kennedy's not that brilliant. She just knows how to split up land rights. Understanding how to do that and learning it from a person who is self-taught gives you politically connections all the way down to the working class, all the way up to the 1% class, which Hollywood and not Markle, Middleton and everyone will not like. And so they're going to attack. But you have all those connections, you have a stronger wall of protection and also the ability to create even more capital. And unfortunately for Middleton, more power, which insulates and protects you. So that's where I'm on that. So back into where we have tyranny, rights without responsibility. That's what persons who externalize themselves, they try to have rights without responsibility, i.e., Trump, slavery, responsibility without rights. But unfortunately, what happens is they try to tyrannize other people who are in self. And so it's just down kicking as opposed to viewing each other as human beings. Freedom is rights with responsibility. Now, we have voting rights in the United States that are being under attack. We have two things: the Build Back Better bill plus the voting rights. Right now, Democrats are saying, oh, well, doesn't look like the gerrymandering was that bad. You know, that's the worst fucking thing to think. Get the voting rights bill through. Yeah, it's slowed, and that's exactly what the Republicans did. They kind of slowed it back so that you wouldn't put it into law. So as soon as they get a chance, they'll flip it. They'll find ways. Or they did the gerrymandering in ways where it looks like, okay, Republican growth is going to grow this direction over the next 10 years or whatever. You cannot allow, can't, you can't allow them to get away with this. Because democracy is in peril if you do. You know, we know private ownership, capital unions, as far as, because what the whole thing is the idea that workers, I think unions should start buying their way onto the seats of these corporations, start buying their way onto the boards, not just assuming that we're just the unions, but actually start having their members buy their way onto the board, buy partial shares. You can buy a part, and start, you know, buy shares themselves and also have shares that are given, but start taking these shares and start putting yourselves onto the boards. Because if you're on the boards, this bullshit about sending jobs away for no reason would go by the way of the dodo. This, because a lot of it is because a lot of these managers that have made it to the top, they're good at politics, and yeah, they're sort of good at running their company, but way too many are just too good at politics and crappy at actually being business persons. Dark money. We need to get rid of dark money. This is the main thing about voting rights. National level floor, mail-in voting. Fascism is taking over, and they're making you. And if you lower your guard, it's going to happen. Unless you keep your guard up and get the spine, you got to make this happen. Even if that means holding the former president and putting him in jail. If it is shown that he attempted a coup and was in knowledge of the coup. You can already do so because it is known, because the way the founders structured the Constitution, we know that persons stepped onto the floor of the House and Senate. They did not have permission from either the Speaker of the House or the head of the Senate, and they did think they were acting in agency to the former president. And realistically, the Democrats should hold hold a vote on the Republicans. If you're going to start a civil war, might as well make sure you get it legally, because if you do not hold these Republicans who voted to not impeach Donald Trump, you're just setting up another coup, because they put party over country, and that is treason. History is calling once again, and and wise persons do what is necessary at the time, not when it's easy, but when it is difficult. You know, Build Back Better is a climate change. That's what you need. And while everyone was laughing about all those ideas that I was talking about, the military was listening. Private industry was listening. Even Elon Musk was listening, because he was even just a couple weeks ago said, solid state batteries. But way to go. Duh. It is time to not let Hollywood screw you over, younglings, because that's what they're trying to do, to get you to not pay attention, or as your mind's still growing, if you're under 25, and if you're 25 or whatever or above, to get you to be angry if you're on the right side, on the far right. And you know we got the physical transportation infrastructure, which is rail, EV charging, computing power, stuff like that. But we also know, if we don't get, woo, you know, I was interested in thinking about all these things. How is this going to affect the military? So I was just thinking of my own thoughts. Um, you know, we have so much to do, and we are capable of doing it. Quantum computing is one of the most whoever controls the quantum computing race, and China believes that they are ahead right now, or they wouldn't be acting so belligerent, will control the next century. If they can keep us stupid and fighting amongst ourselves by not investing in our people, they can make us poor. If we invest in our people, we could outcompete them. But if we don't invest in our people, like what Manchin's doing, they will outcompete us. We have to make that choice. The Great Society was built on these levers: VA, Social Security, Medicare, of course, military, and infrastructure, human and physical. And you have to pull these levers to make society great. And racism is a false construct. So, with the human infrastructure, we've been getting our ass kicked, both with voting rights, because Manchin wants to keep his people of West Virginia, which is 95% Caucasoid, poor, so he can stay, make himself feel like the big man. Cinema is being played with her own cynicism out in Arizona. So it is imperative in 2022, whether you like the Democrats or not, if you are a true patriot, you hold your nose and you just vote down the line. Once voting rights is in, Once the Build Back Better is in, then go back to being whatever independent, Republican, or whatever. But the voting rights and Build Back Better are the two most important things because, much to the, as you know, much to the chagrin of many, because of my family history and because of my affiliations, being a 1% has nothing to do with capital. Granted, it helps, but I don't need 1%. I don't need capital to be a 1%er. It's my affiliations that make me. And my affiliations make me even higher than a 1%er. And that's a kick in the groin for many. And behaviors. Because my sister-in-law damn sure destroyed my brother. He cannot, because of his behaviors. And he's changed a great deal of who he is because of her. He can't be trusted. All of this is doable. You just gotta have the will and the focus. And I think we do. One of the main things with the new filibuster is because the filibuster needs to be changed to this. 55 votes. Because also, 55 votes, 41 senators on the floor, talking filibuster, none of this freaking pocket crap. If they truly have a moral uppercummance of something, then they should be able to stand on the freaking floor and say it. And there was something that just passed my brain for a second and flashed and waiting for it to return. But history calls for us to do this. Can we do this? Do we have the strength to do this? Yeah, that's up to the American people. Because we're either going to be an autocracy within 6 years, or we'll stay a democracy for another 100. That's the stakes. And if people, you know, voting rights, Build Back Better, because that creates, because voting rights, then you can use that keeps things in, and the Build Back Better invest in people so we can compete globally, and that makes us a better country and it makes us richer. And then from that wealth, we can then help the world. But if we do not create our own wealth, we cannot help the world create greater wealth throughout every place. It's up to us. You can allow the left, the bigots of the South and of Hollywood, um, destroy this country, or you can stand up. We can get back to being a bigot afterwards. And there's one last thing I want to state. The reason, one of the things about Rangers of the New Republic, and it's the biggest slap in the face to veterans, she canceled it. It is a tribute to veterans, a true tribute. And she wanted to use McRaven, as we've now known as a bigot, as like because she's working with him, as the person to talk about it, or it's not the word I'm thinking of. The word's not coming to me right now. I can see the action, but the word's not coming. But you consult on it. That's the word. I would say Admiral Osi, much better pick, because McRaven threw him under the bus over something that everybody does. And so you knew as soon as I read it, I was like, this is bullshit. Everybody does this. And it was, and also the fact that when he put him over Africa Corps, I went, oh gosh, that was a straight bigoted thing. Oh, this is you've shown that you know how to handle those black folks, those darkies, kind of thing. It's funny how they isomorph on everything. So if not Admiral Osi, then another general, Army general, as a consultant. McChrystal comes to mind as well if you want to stick with the Army. But Rangers of the New Republic would help, using Star Wars, help Americans understand what veterans we cannot and will not speak about. Because you can't have just an actor or an actress who does not understand sacrifice, portray the roles of a veteran. I just don't feel like it can be done. As a fighter, Gina Carano understands this. Carl Weathers understands this. Is willing to put the work in. That was the biggest slap in the face that she did to us veterans. So she can do some whatever. So that way she can cleave the country apart because she's jealous over George Lucas, and she even said it in a video. Oh, that just came out of your head. Well, if it just came out of your head, how comes her husband wasn't able to create Star Wars? Or even be able to create the stories within the same mythos structure. That's one thing about NPD. People who suck laugh at others because they're trying to hide their own incompetence. She's good at raising money. And because it would require far too much inward introspection, she can only be a Sith. It is the reason the Jedi picked kids before they turned, which I still think is wrong. Because people can change, but she has no wants to. Hatred is her thing. Bigotry is her thing. And that is, since Star Wars was her, The Last Jedi was her story, she said how she felt about George Lucas. She had hammered him for years. And yet because the way it worked, the way the manipulation works, he still believed and had hope. Held out hope for what he thought it was his friend. Maybe she can turn. Maybe she can still find the light. And I think he will hold that truth until his last day. And for that, sir, I salute you. May the force be with you, always. And may 2022 be an awesome one. We have much work to do. We're Americans. We kick ass. It's what we do. Once again, may the force be with you, and Happy New Year.